Welcome to my tour of the Gennett Walk of Fame in Richmond, Indiana on August 23rd, 2015. Here we have Georgia Tom. These, as I've been told, lots of these were put here spaced out, and then they incrementally put them in different spots over the years when people were put in. So here we have Wendell Hall. Here's Guy Lombardo. He was a band leader in the 1930s, 1940s, and on. And so you can tell that, I mean, some of the sidewalks you can tell is in between. I don't know how they were when they first put all these in. I'm sure they weren't had all the cracks in them, but it's kind of gotten into disrepair. But most of the mosaics are still in good shape. Here's King Oliver. King Oliver was probably pretty much one of the first real jazz legends, I guess you could say. About 1922, 1923, Louis Armstrong joined his band, and they came here to Richmond to record. We'll get to Satchmo here in a little bit as we work our way down. Here we have Coleman Hawkins, who's a fantastic sax player, kind of unknown probably by most people, but that, you know, hopefully some of these people come down here and they'll see these and learn about them. So here we are at the main person of the event, Louis Armstrong, who did his first recordings here in Richmond, again with King Oliver back in 1923. Some really landmark recordings with that group. Here's Bradley Kincaid, guitar player. I can't even imagine, I mean, just looking around over here on the other side, I mean, you can see this is the old smokestack from the piano company, Star Piano Company, and then down here that's where they recorded a 6-story building, and all that's left is pretty much a skeleton of it, and I'll show more of that when I get down to it. Here's Blind Lemon Jefferson, who's also kind of unknown. Blues singer. He did his last recordings here, I can't remember what year it was, 1929, and about December of that year he was found dead in Chicago, so his last recordings were basically here in Richmond. Here's the Pace Jubilee Singers, very nice group of singers. And then we have Lawrence Welk. He also did his first recordings here in Richmond back in the 1920s. And in the summer of 2014, I got to stay at a resort that has his name. It's the Welk Resorts out near Escondido, which is near San Diego. And I did not realize he had recorded here until I was doing more research on the Walk of Fame. So he actually had stayed at this resort, and it was named after him. It was kind of his own little getaway, and then it became more of a place for other people. Here's Uncle Dave Macon, the good old banjo there. Here's Lonnie Johnson, also a guitar player. Some of these people I don't know much about. I always want to learn and just never do. So I hope to change that. Here's Vernon Dowlert. Some of these people actually didn't record here in Richmond. They actually recorded for Gennett. Well, not Gennett, Gennett. Gennett is a different company altogether. Back in the 1920s too, so some of them they got him here. This is Sidney Bechet. He was a cornet player, or no, I'm sorry, a clarinet player. It's a clarinet. Somebody I'm sure would be upset with me for calling that what it's not. And here's one of the first real major stars of the blues. This is Big Bill Broonzy. I always remember him being mentioned in a George Harrison song. I always thought that was interesting, but he kind of learned. He did tours. Big Bill Broonzy did tours in Europe in the 40s and 50s, and a lot of the British kids learned how to play guitar because they heard of Big Bill Broonzy. Here's Artie Shaw. He was also a band leader. He was married to somebody famous, and I can't remember who. Of course, it's not going to tell me on here. I'll have to go look it up. Yeah, we got quite a few to go here. Here's Red Nichols, good old Red Nichols. I assume because of his hair, doesn't look too red though. It's pretty quiet down here for a Sunday evening. I've been down here at different times, still not a lot of people around. Here's one of my favorite people, Big Spiderback. Remember many years ago, there was a question about him on Jeopardy that I got right, and I always thought that was really weird that I knew that, but I'd heard mention of him so many times. He was also a cornet player, just like Louis Armstrong was when he first started. He was probably just as good in the beginning. We got Fletcher Henderson. He was a bit of a band leader too. Sidney Bechet was in his orchestra for a while. And we have the New Orleans Rhythm Kings. They were kind of the first ensemble of white jazz players. And some of the other people here, I think Big Spiderback played with them for a couple of times too. I don't know if they recorded with him here, but they might have. Gene Autry did some of his very first recordings here that were now what we kind of consider very early country and western songs. He went on to be very famous, and we all know lots of his Christmas songs. Here's good old Fats Waller, another great blues player. Jazz, it's kind of such a mix with jazz and blues. They're got a lot of similarities between them. Here's Ernest and Hattie Frost Stoneman, a couple that recorded, I assume, here. Again, there's some of these people I don't know as much about as I should, and I'll hopefully change that someday. By learning more about him, here's Charlie Patton. He was a blues player too. And here's one of my favorites, great piano player, Jelly Roll Morton. Probably not as well known as he should be, but fairly well known for the most part. And Duke Ellington, I don't believe Duke Ellington actually recorded here, but he recorded for Gennett up in New York, just like some of these other people did. But they've been acknowledged here because of the company itself. Here's Alberta Hunter. She was considered the first lady blues singer. So yeah. Here's Homer Rodeheaver. I don't know too much about him either. And I know Louis is probably my favorite, but another one of my real all-time favorites is Hoagy Carmichael. Just because he's from here in Indiana, which I don't think can be said about anyone else in the Gennett Walk of Fame. And he went to IU in Bloomington like I did, and he recorded Stardust here. It was one of his, probably the first in his first session, I assume. But it was the first time he recorded here, and that's become just a standard in jazz music. You can see that they're doing some construction down here. I'm not totally sure all what they're doing, probably trying to put a road in again. But here we are at the Gennett Studios, and I'll have some photos of all the markers, or not all the markers, but some of the markers, and I'll get other photos of the actual studio itself. But it's just kind of become a skeleton, and I know they're trying to work on doing something to keep it in the shape it's in. So I hope you enjoyed this little tour of the Gennett Walk of Fame.